Let's go, 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 go!
You're listening to the go-go sound of all-America radio. With music, fun, and entertainment. This is the pace of a modern America. A working America. A fun-loving America. And the combination is complete. You, the music, and...
KMUN, the commune, the People's K.
Go, go, go!
Shut up and start talking.
As if it was also real. Manslaughter sat in her chair, caressing hair that was tangled, dry and brittle. Her hair matched her soul. We called her manslaughter because she had killed a person in her sleep. It was futile, pathetic and ironic. She had taken sleeping pills to fall asleep, yet she ended up waking after about 4 hours, dressed, grabbed a set of keys, drove a car through a neighborhood, out onto a main thoroughfare and hit a homeless man. He was dead on impact. She slammed her face into the steering wheel, had to have her jaw shut for months, remained in custody at a mental facility and ended up in our little halfway house of affected misanthropes. Our very own suburban cell consisted of one of those charity houses where a person went that was too sane to be committed, yet too mentally disturbed to live on their own. Some of us had tried suicide, some of us were violent, some of us were substance abusers, and some of us just wanted to be here. We were all women in our 30s, all women with really nothing going for us, but we were not all lesbians. The lesbian girls were really quite fantastic, but we were not all lesbians. A few of us were actually not even sexual. There were 10 girls in all: Manslaughter, Doris, Dory, Magpie, Mary, June Smith College, Beth, Bethany, Frank, Francis Storm Drumright, Nan, Pruitt and me. Gobsmack, go fuck yourself. These charity houses could not divulge private information, so we had to give ourselves a nickname that best suited us. Doris, Mary and Beth used their real names to be funny, and to be rebels. They didn't care about rules. They were lipstick lesbians, drug addicts and fashion conscious. They were really quite nice, unless you turned them down for sex, which I most certainly did because I did not want to have sexual relations. I wanted to be a human being with no feelings. I wanted to be detached from the other earthen dwellers. The house was on a normal suburban street, looked like all of the other houses and had 3 stories. We slept 2 to a room, shared 3 bathrooms, ate together, and had 1 entertainment room, a library and a place to make telephone calls. The telephone calls were very important to us. It is how we communicated to the world. We only went out once a month in public, mostly because we looked like train wrecks stitched back together by Avon and cardigan sweaters, and, besides, the lesbian girls were too tempted to ask people for pills and kisses. We could sit on the front porch and read, sunbathe in the backyard, tend to the flower garden, but most of us just stayed inside and tried very, very hard to go mental, and, besides, we had our phone calls. Some of the girls would hook up on Friday nights in the laundry room, or in Mary's room, which was designated as the kill zone. Petals of flowers and fragrances of donated Chanel perfume would dominate the groans from behind the closed door. I would listen at times, but I mostly stared out of my window into the dark of night, that is if I wasn't taking my phone calls. I found that if you stare at something long enough, you could trick your brain into believing just about anything. I once stared at the wall for so long, I saw blood gowns hung as drapes in the Versailles while innocent torsos slid up and down the catwalk of a fashion show with no attendees. The chairs and lights were anemic, but the music was like a dirge and the people that were not there clapped with their lips. Nan told me to get the phone. It had been ringing for me. She knew this because each girl had a different ringtone, and mine happened to be 4 rings followed by 2 rings followed by 4 rings. I picked up the receiver and heard the breathing, deep and low, sequestered to impulse alone, and most likely alcohol. Charity House, I said. The breathing quickened, but no words. I mean, that was the idea. The other end of the phone line never spoke. Take out your razor blade, I continued. Now gently cut the line, no more than 1/2 inch deep. Apply lots of pressure and cut until you feel pleasure. The panting on the other line confirmed that my instruction was done implicitly, which made the experience a positive one because I would get good marks on my next review. Now the peroxide, clean and bandage and enjoy watching the scar heal. I hung up and went back towards my room. Nan asked me how it went. Quick, I said, it always goes too fast. I plunged myself into the abyss of a noir dime store novel where the girl has telepathy and can see ghosts right before they enter the souls of men that are rapists. Once the ghosts enter the souls, they no longer want to rape girls, they want to become eunuchs and join the Buddhist monastery at the edge of town. I waited for my next phone call and tried to make a mental note of what laundry I had to do the next day. I never had sex before, but the one time I tried to kiss the sterility of another human mouth, I could only turn in disgust. I heard the phone ring. It wasn't for me, it was the special ring. It was for manslaughter.
It's 20 minutes before 8. There's not much quicker way to end it all than to jump off a freeway overpass, and an unidentified man took that easy way out off the Woodward Bridge onto the westbound Edsel Ford late this afternoon. Investigators still checking that scene, and traffic is tied up on the westbound Edsel Ford near Woodward. That man dead by the time he got to Detroit General after being beaten into the pavement by at least 3 vehicles. Police now trying to figure out who and why. Meanwhile, long lines of hot, throbbing, homebound traffic.
Be great.
Tu antojo está experimentando un caso intenso de necesito un trago de mi bebida favorita en el mundo entero. Por solo...
With the melted garlic herb butter?
The new one has that too, plus grilled onions and portobello.
KMUN, the Commune, the People's K. The Commune is a community of people establishing a voice for the like-minded without having to deceive each other with labels and limitations. Gallery, recording studio, venue, symposium, community classes, lectures, record label and distribution center all adequately describe yet fail to capture the true essence of what a gathering of artistic drifters are willing to sacrifice in order to simply contribute culture to their city.
Bleed it all away.
Oh man.
Being a human is worthless. We are made up of ego and senses that do not calibrate correctly. We are the epitome of what is wrong. We are starvation masked as futility. Everyone is dissatisfied. The rich are weary of the poor are always wanting to be rich. The boss clashes with the employee resents the boss. This is nothing new. We have been here for so long it is sickening. Nothing ever changes. Things are born. Things die. I have wanted to die for so long. I feel pathetically useless now. I cannot even command the decency to end it all because of fear. Yet fear of living proves to be just as debilitating. This is my own human conundrum. The pressing will to survive, or the need to pass on from existence. When I was a much younger man, I believed, like so many other young men, that I could change the world. I then realized that I could not change the world, but I could change myself. As I grew older, I finally realized that I could not change myself, for what is, can never be changed. The self has to settle on his or her own version of what the truth is. And the truth is certainly subjective because it very rarely has an ounce of truth in it. My version of the truth I had created was obsessively created because I could no longer maintain the creation I was, nor could I maintain what it was I never could be. I never could be the very thing I was, nor could I be everything I wasn't meant to be, which left me basically being the very same me I always maintained I was. But only after I realized all of the things I never could have been. The present state of this existence is solely mandated to become what you think you are, instead of facing up to the things you are not, or to the very thing you have become. We are dilated to never see the clearest form of the created illusion. We cannot accept that we are most likely the extreme opposite of whatever we think we are, or have become. So, we trudge along our mundane days, as misanthropic skeptics, wearing crowns of humanity, made up of vomit and filth, in a resurrection of lending a hand, to save those very same beings, we so persistently resent. I resented myself, but for reasons beyond my peripheral. What I really resented was not being able to accomplish the things that fascinated me because the pains of their realities were either too great or too detrimental. I only had one chance to explore a fetish such as death, and my soul could not bear the outcome of the other episodic experiments of human curiosity. Although others had tried to encourage exploration, to push the human mind, the body, into places that seemed bereft of reason, I could really see no point in journeying any further. The best outcome would be to possibly extend the trivialities of life. Yet at what price does one have to pay for such pleasure? And is that price affordable in enough to life unforeseen? Hedonism is a mere practice, the same practice as all of the religions that ensnare the human being into living out a falsity, but it is no more a falsity than living a non-religious life, whereby the self condemns the soul to no home, thereby the sailing ship circles the sea with no star to guide it. The reduction of life's miseries was never something I was interested in anyways, and I would have never been so weak as to suggest that one thing or another caused the insufficient methods of my reaction to having to live life. Being stranded in an arena for no apparent reason is not necessarily just cause to proclaim open warfare on what you could never prove to begin with, and it certainly was not destiny's fault that suspended the self to the treacherous purgatory of life. I was where I was because I simply awoke one day and found myself there, and I really did not see it as being any more than that. Feminism began as culture. Culture began as a prostitute. The prostitute began as society. It was all very real in the 21st century. Every illusion, every single vice, every thought, every keystroke, every whimper, every war, and every damned thing under the sun was everywhere imploding on me, even if only taken in through the two hollow stares I called my eyes. What I couldn't see, I could imagine, and it wasn't that hard to imagine that charade after charade left a dismal hangover of repetitive hunger that never went away. As man reached further into the cosmos of the illusion believed to be true, the further man got away from having to feed a soul that had long ago been abandoned. Starvation was the banquet table of life's last hostile takeover, essentially accomplishing the still nothing we had all already achieved. It was as if someone was actually going to give birth to the final chapter of humanity, yet it was simply another delusional and dull chapter, an addition to long sets of sequences barbarically force-fed to everyone left standing. Crawling around the hemisphere like door-to-door salesmen, every human being paraded their opiates of waste to each other, inflicting more vile uselessness with each visit, violating their opponent with each breath, diminishing the lifeblood and draining ounce by ounce the limitation most referred to as individuality. We were exposed to beat our chests harder, bang our silly drums louder and clink our can along the bars to our cage in unison, all for a dream nobody subscribed to, all for a place in a line that did not exist, all to receive the adulations from a crowd that wasn't cheering, and all for a pat on the back from the hand that had already bitten, and never had fed. Experimentation in the conundrum that is daily existence was pathological. Existence more akin to resistant strains of posture was a more apt way of referring to the human condition. By no means were there ever any serious doubts that fear had played a heavy hand in the daily decisions of mankind. Fear perpetuated every illusion, and more so, in that, fear was gasoline to the illusion. The illusion needed fuel, and man simply fanned the flame. I walked in my daily corpse with reticence. We all did. And we all took our meager portions of what life doled out to us with indifference. Revolutions were abandoned, and revolt was ashen under tombstone. Revolutions never accomplished anything more than a changing of the illusion, anyhow, and they were boring. People gave their lives to causes, which was, in any estimation, simply pathetic. Silent daily dirges acridly filling the pale blue sky with uselessness. And all that remained at the end of the rope was a lousy dollar, and an overwhelmed, if not, totally exhausted ego. We were cannon fodder in our own civil wars, yet we clung to our hope, as if our hope was all we needed to march directly to our demise, our extinguished bodily performances. This was a crude way to circumvent the atmosphere, and I wondered at times if we were in some other aquarium being watched by something else just as pathetic, yet maybe slightly more engaging than us. Social media was our celebratory gestalt, our last gasping ideology for the masses. We fell for it. We delivered the drug. Hell. We profited from the illusion maybe more than the illusion profited from us because it gave us new ground where none was to be had, and landscape is very important to the human condition. We had, by now, learned that if no new frontier could be found, we would make one. If one were good, then anything more than one would be better. So we started creating illusions inside of illusions, propped them up with foundational supports beyond the average mind, and sold the soul as being what humanity loved to refer to as the future. It was still glass and metal. It was still paper and fire. It was still bone and membrane. But this time it was so gorgeously generated, by means of the device in which the drug was delivered, that the equation of those that would become addicted was so inherently high, that whomever fell by the wayside, only did so with respect to the fact that they were useless to the herd anyway. Perfect solutions had never yielded such perfect results. How could one not contemplate suicide every day? All of us basically did, in our own way, whether by watching television, or by manual labor, or through the mad sequences of humanity passing before each and every blink of an eye. We killed ourselves off each day, in some form or another, again and again, time after time. The relevancy of life had become more demure, more opaque than that of which I remembered as a child. Things had more definition back then, right from wrong, work from play, and good from bad. The lines of modernity had blurred the landscape of society to where everything was based on how one felt about oneself, and their own moralities and ethics were the beacon for landing the societal ship on the sad harbors of civility. There was no litmus test for the general procedures of domestic acceptability. There was no profit in discipline, honoring your word, hard work, or accountability. Everyone had an opinion based on whatever it was they read or were told. No one seemed bothered by the fact that their lives were meaningless and trivial, and everyone lived in fear. I know I did, and I know how unsettling it was to never really get to know the true essence of what the interior held. I was obviously born to be an example, a certain sacrifice to the societal illness that swallowed the masses. Martyrdom may not be the word for it, but it was my own gift for the others that would follow behind me. Mercy comes in a small doses for the human being, and the bridge between the pain we feel and the joy we experience was a long, mournful crawl. Cyclical daily tolerance, abusing the privilege of being in a place where anything could happen. For me, it wasn't so much an ethical issue as it was boredom for the outcome of something entirely new. Murder was not new, sex was not new, stealing was not new, and wandering the earth disguised as something like the second coming was not new either. I had done the work in previous stages to be able to reach the conclusion that society needed a different kind of enlightenment. There was a growing concern amongst the masses that life was a precious gift only to be extinguished by that futility referred to as death. However, in reaching my conclusion, I was not so sure everyone should live, or, at least, live out their days until death came naturally calling them, whether by fate, sickness, auto accident, heart attack. For me, the numbers did not necessarily add up. The only real question I had to pose was this: are we exposed to take our own lives at a certain time, if death has, up to that time, abandoned us?
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
trippy.
It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell me neither. It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell me neither. I won't tell me neither. I won't tell me neither. I won't. Oops. It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell you neither. It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell you neither. It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell you neither. It's too much, tell me one thing. I won't tell you neither. I won't tell you neither. I won't tell you neither. I won't. Oops. Buying me. I said I wouldn't take my hurt. Take my hurts, take my hurts, take my hurts, take my hurts. I said I wouldn't take my hurt. Take my hurts, take my hurts, take my hurts, take my hurts. I won't tell you no, because it's nasty, that husband, whatever I do, I'll take it. I won't tell you no, because it's nasty, that husband, whatever I do, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it. I won't tell you no, because it's nasty, that husband, whatever I do, I'll take it. I won't tell you no, because it's nasty, that husband, whatever I do, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it, I'll take it. Make music out of that shit. I dare you.
Everything was neatly placed beside the bathtub. Towel, hydrogen peroxide, bandage, and razor blade. It was always like this, ritual and symbolic, yet without the bravado. This was more like elitism, but with bloodshed. She was intrinsically perfect. Her cutting began as a child, far earlier than my suicidal tendencies. Unlike my genetic disposition, her additional attributes stemmed from an abusive father and an alcoholic mother who never tried to save her. Cutters are not like the rest of society. They have very intimate reasons why they self-mutilate. I don't think she wanted to die. I think she wanted to be understood. We all do in our own way, I guess. I admired her courage, but not her courage to cut herself. I admired her courage to want to live. She was very beautiful. Dirty bleach blonde bangs, radiantly dull hazel eyes that were almond-shaped and bloated pouty lips. The scarring of her skin from the cutting was the most attractive aspect of her otherwise fragile physique. I would long for the nights when we would just sit up late, watched television, and I would trace her scars with my finger. She didn't seem to mind. She thought I was childlike when it came to her cutting. Often I would come home from work, and she'd be passed out on the bathroom floor after an intense cutting session. Other times, she would want to go out and scour the city streets, looking for the bizarre, or the homeless. I never asked her why she loved homeless people so much, but she always stopped and had a chat with anyone sitting under a bridge, or laying in an alley. She was drawn to the alienated of our society. It was courageous, beautiful, poetic, and slightly obvious. I was different, mostly in that I didn't really care about anything. I liked her, but I wanted to take my life. The thought consumed me, and it was all I really had on my mind. She would ask me what I was waiting for, which I thought was an excellent question, and that is what I would reply with. I would tell her that was an excellent question, and then we would French kiss, get an ice cream cone, and walk the city streets looking at the exact same things in two totally different ways. It really was an excellent question. What was I waiting for? If I was a suicide, or if I had what many doctors called the suicide gene, then why was I still breathing? Fear? Damnation? I gathered just about every emotion factors in, but there always seemed to me that there would be a time when I would know, and that time, simply, had not come. Sharon had said that by the time you are willing to commit the act of self-murder, the profundity of the act had already passed. In a way, he was right. Yet Sharon continued to exist in a society, in a place, that he seemingly did not care for, which, to someone like me, means that he must have found some endearing quality about the human experience. I, however, did not find anything redeeming about life. Not even her. It is true that her presence eased the pain I felt. It is a fact that her obedience to cutting herself made me feel somewhat alive, and it is a fact that, without her in my life, I would have nothing fragile to hang my own fragility against. But she wasn't enough to keep me from taking my own life. Suicide was a given. Suicide was simply a matter of time. 21st century living was boring. Too many people rummaging the social stratosphere ridiculously pathetic. And we both wondered if anyone else really got it. It is this. Does the average human being really want to be here? Does the average human being need to be here? Why is the average human being here? We would pass people in stores and think, why is that one hanging on? It was elitism at its very worst, which, as elitists, means it was elitism at its very best. The new human attitude, or strategy, was to be kind to everyone. All the while, everyone secretly hated everyone else, or maybe not too secretly, but it was definitely social warfare, and it was absolutely grueling to watch. Most of us had become so fake, so disingenuous, and it became all about saving the animals, and saving the farms, and saving the corporations, and less about saving each other. We both agreed that saving anything, especially each other, was dreadful. We were absolutely okay with watching each other disintegrate, and found it quite dignified to do so. She was compassionate towards some aspects of life, and I was not, but that was the beautiful part about being complicated. Evening came quickly, as if the day knew the anticipation, the impulses of the end, and I arrived at a decision. And all the arrangements were made, at least within my own mind, and I was looking forward to seeing the new dawn. Over the course of the last year, I spent most of my time getting rid of worldly possessions, acquiring very little new material objects, mostly obtaining only disposable necessities, and burning the paper trail of an existence entirely unnecessary. I was okay that my legacy was nothing special, that my contribution to this place was minimal, and that my narcissism's need to be fed was an appetite suppressed by tranquilizers, low self-esteem, and ascetical enlivenment. My soul saw the world as weak, and my mind upheld a rigidly fanatical constitution that prescribed to an ideal I didn't feel needed to be proved. In short, I was fine with drifting into anonymity. The apartment was very bare, by modern standards, and the couch coincided with a very small television set, a bookcase, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, a bed in one room, and nothing in the other room. There were some clothes, some old movies, some books, some cassette tapes, some boxes of food, and her cutting kit. Her ritual cutting kit, as she called it, was quite impressive. It was a metal box that opened to a bevy of knives, razor blades, shards of glass, mirrors, tape, peroxide, bandages, lipstick, eyeliner, lighters, and a very unique Japanese carving knife. In Oriental culture, the idea of harikari was not an unusual one, so she had found this little replica knife in some downtown shop, and just had to have it. She used this particular knife for special carvings. For carvings when the pain was so bad she needed that little extra something. Amazing. The dedication to the art of her own madness. It was so fucking pure. It was slutty, and I loved her for it. We had talked on many occasions about trading my suicide for cutting, exploring a new avenue that could let me have my fixation, but on a level I could control, and on a level that was not so permanent. It just wasn't meant to be, though, and even though I respected her for trying to save me, I ultimately did not want to be saved. She understood that, which is why I always stayed with her. All of the other people in my life tried to save me. How do you save a suicide? You don't. I'd spent the day walking through the narrow streets around the city, taking in the things I'd seen all of my life for the last time. Now back at the apartment, with darkness descending, my thoughts turned to the intensive preparation I knew she'd want to take to perform acts of mutilation. She was very cool about the idea of us cutting together, yet I am quite sure she was also a little bit suspicious of my motives. My only reassurance to her was that she could control the session, and that I would let her lead me through the steps to obtain the most amount of pleasure as possible, but, once achieving her decadent affair, I would take it from there based on my mood, or, better stated, based on my fate's mood. So we were all set: towel, hydrogen peroxide, bandage, and razor blade, a few candles. Some penderecki, no notes, just us. Together, me with no shirt or shoes, only pants, and her, with her short dress and birthday cake layered mascara. Into oblivion we both headed, into eternity we both sojourned. She placed the razor blade across her left forearm, and slowly made about a 1-inch incision. Her eyes rolled back just a bit, as if she could feel the blade glide across every millimeter of skin. A stream of dark, thick red blood flowed down her arm and onto the pale white tiled bathroom floor. She turned her arm a little to the side, and watched as more blood flowed, the tilt making it easier to release all of the pain she was holding on to, all of the hurt this world had caused. The razor blade was tossed onto the floor as she reached for a towel. She reached over and washed her arm under cold water, and, like she'd done hundreds of times before, used the hydrogen peroxide to stop the bleeding. As she stared at the wound, her gaze became angelic, a loving and tender look that a mom gives a newborn baby, and you could see she was pleased with her work. Taking some gauze and some adhesive tape, she patted the incision dry and bandaged herself up. Placing a couple of fingers up her skirt, she gyrated for a few seconds in front of the mirror, sighed, and gently knelt to the ground, curling up in a fetal position of orgasmic bliss. Her eyes met mine. She nodded towards the razor, and gave me permission to follow her. I stared at the razor blade. I stared into her eyes, and, although she was gone, lost somewhere in the high of self-mutilation, I knew she was somewhat with me, and I didn't feel the loneliness I had experienced for the better part of 40 years. Wherever she was at peace for the time being, and that made me feel better. She had bought some time, maybe not much, yet maybe enough. The razor still had her blood on it, As her eyes grew weary, I stroked her hair and kissed her pursed lips. It was a goodbye. I shut the water off from the sink and put the cap back on the peroxide bottle. She was asleep now, peacefully dreaming in shades of crimson red. I took the razor blade, slit each of my wrists as deep as I could, and I rolled into the bathtub, dropping the blade near her left shoulder. This was the only time I had ever laid in a bathtub without water. It would be the only time, and as the blood flowed, my mind was drained of all the pain, all of the anguish, all of the guilt, and with each ounce of blood, each ounce of my humanity was set free to roll down the drain into some rusty pipe of some indistinct apartment, into some unnoticed sewer in just another town of just another city in one of the many countries on one of the many planets in a vast solar system of a universe beyond anyone's comprehension. When she awoke, her body was sore from lying on the tile floor, groggy, but confident. She pulled down her dress and tried to collect her thoughts. She noticed her bandaged arm, and although it was a bit tender, the pain had mostly subsided, as it always did, and her first inclination was to lift the bandage to see the damage, but something else was pulling at her attention. She got to her knees, and saw his body slumped in the bathtub. He did it the wrong way, she thought. She should have let him go first. She should have watched over him. All that blood, all that precious blood could have been used again and again, but she had been selfish, maybe even greedy, and now he was gone. He had gone too far. He had made the mistake of the beginner. He let himself bleed it all away.
Tried to make it far, forever looking to the light. How could I be blind, looking at the signs? Decadence and malnutrition filter from below, tattooed on my soul. A black sun's all I know. When you're old, lean and pale, not good looking anymore. Death packs agents of suicide, but rarely they prevail. Fly into the sky, so high we'd never make it back. Libraries of meaningless words that one never quotes, but tattooed on my soul is a black sun, and it's all I know. When you're alive, heart beating fast, so young and pretty for now. If they survive the things that kill me in the end. I will hold them in my flesh and blood while still asleep, only for a while. Make the headlines an exit plan. Legacies will stand and find the lucky years from now. We're all tied to a soul keeper, and a black sun's all I know. When you're dead, still and serene, left and right, matching